Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're really tearing into a piece that, well, it basically argues the whole field of invasion science is kind of falling behind fast.
Yeah, it's a big one. We're looking at that 2020 paper led by Anthony Ricciardi and a whole international team. 4 priority areas to advance invasion science in the face of rapid environmental change.
And it's framed as a consensus, which gives it some real weight.
Absolutely. It's investigating this huge challenge, the sheer speed and scale of non-native species getting moved around because of globalization. It's just overwhelming our current biosecurity.
And the stakes are, well, they're enormous, aren't they? Biodiversity, farming, fishing, economies, even human health.
Definitely. So the paper isn't just like listing bad bugs. It's trying to figure out where the science itself needs to change fundamentally to cope with this era, the Anthropocene.
Right. And they zeroed in on 4 big, urgent priorities. Let's start with their first one, getting better at predicting the ecological impacts.
Yeah, and what's really interesting here is they point out that invasion science has actually gotten pretty decent at predicting establishment, figuring out if a new species can survive somewhere new.
Okay.
But where we're really struggling is predicting when and where an established species is going to actually cause significant harm. Like flip that switch from just being present to being destructive.
Ah, okay. That's a critical distinction because most invaders don't cause huge problems, right?
Exactly. They make this really neat comparison. It's like an inverse magnitude frequency distribution. Sounds technical, but
Like earthquakes or something. A lot of small tremors, very few massive ones.
precisely. Most introductions are minor, maybe even undetectable. But the few that really blow up cause massive catastrophic damage.
So if you can't predict those big ones, those ecological disasters, you might waste all your time and money on the little guys.
Right. While the real ecological time bomb is just sitting there, ticking away quietly.
And it can sit for a while, can it? That's the time-light idea they bring up.
Yeah, that's a huge headache. An invader might seem totally harmless for years, maybe decades. Then something changes the climate, its own genetics. Maybe it just hits a critical population size and boom, it explodes.
So just recognizing patterns after the fact isn't enough. We need better theories, better frameworks for prediction before the explosion.
Exactly. And they highlight a couple of key theoretical approaches. First, there's the environmental matching hypothesis.
Okay, what's that?
It basically suggests that an invader's impact will be strongest only when the specific environmental conditions, think temperature, salinity, soil pH, maybe dissolved ions in water, perfectly match that invader's physiological sweet spot.
So the same species could be a nightmare in one lake, but totally fine in the lake next door just because the water chemistry is slightly different?
Precisely. They mention this example with invasive fish, where the concentration of certain ions in the water dictates how intensely they prey on native species.
Yeah.
If the conditions aren't optimal for the invader, its impact might be minimal.
Interesting. And the second framework?
That's the ecological distinctiveness hypothesis, sometimes called functional distinctiveness.
Meaning?
The idea here is that the impact is likely to be most severe when the invader brings something completely new to the ecosystem, functionally speaking. A new way to hunt, a new way to compete, maybe a chemical defense the natives have never encountered.
Ah, so if it fills a role or introduces a trait that the native community just has no evolutionary experience with.
Exactly. The natives are ecologically naive. They haven't evolved defenses or strategies to cope with this novel threat. It's not just about numbers, it's about the novelty of the invader.
Okay, that makes sense. So predicting impact is tough even in a stable world. Which brings us right to priority 2, dealing with climate change and how it interacts, creates synergies with invasions. This feels like the core Anthropocene challenge.
It really is. And a key concept here is performance advantage. The data increasingly shows that under rapidly changing or stressful climate conditions, non-native species often actually do better than native species.
They adapt faster or they tolerate the new extremes better.
Yeah, both. They mention the Asian tiger mosquito, for instance, outcompeting native mosquitoes in North America, partly because the warmer temperatures favor it.
Right. And the Monterey pine example in Spain, a non-native tree that grows faster than native conifers under certain stressful conditions. It almost uses the stress to get ahead.
Exactly. And it's not just about gradual warming. We have to consider extreme events, hurricanes, floods, massive heat waves, droughts.
These act like giant disturbances, right,
Yeah.
resetting the ecosystem.
Totally. They can wipe out established native plants and animals, which clears the field, basically.
Hmm.
Plus, they often increase resource availability, like nutrients after a flood. It's an open invitation for invaders.
Like rolling out the red carpet? They mentioned floods helping spread invasive carp and zebra mussels, didn't they? Or hurricanes physically blowing things like the cactus moth to new islands.
Yeah, those are powerful examples.
Yep.
But here's a twist. It's not just the climate itself. It's also our response to climate change that can make things worse.
How so?
Well, think about climate adaptation and mitigation. We build massive infrastructure, seawalls, flood controls, dams, even offshore wind farms.
Okay.
These create entirely new types of habitats, or they act as stepping stones, corridors, for species moving along coastlines or rivers, often hitching rides on the construction equipment or vessels.
Wow. And what about mitigation, like planting trees to soak up carbon?
Ah, yes. That can backfire too, unfortunately. Many large-scale afforestation projects aimed at climate mitigation end up planting huge monocultures of fast-growing non-native trees.
Which then become invasive themselves.
Often, yes. They might be great for quick carbon sequestration in the short term, but they create a massive, long-term ecological problem. An invasion debt, you could say.
That term invasion debt is chilling, and this even touches on conservation efforts, like moving species around.
Right. Things like rewilding, where you reintroduce species to restore ecosystem functions, or assisted migration, where you deliberately move a species because its current habitat is becoming unsuitable due to climate change.
That really blurs the line with introducing a non-native species, doesn't it? How do we make sure we're not just creating the next invasion problem in the name of conservation?
That's where rigorous, standardized risk assessment becomes absolutely critical. The paper emphasizes using tools like EICAT and CCAT.
Can you quickly break those down?
Sure, EICAT is the Environmental Impact Classification for alien taxa. CCAT is the Socioeconomic Impact Classification of alien taxa. They're basically frameworks to objectively score the potential negative impacts, environmental or socioeconomic, of a species before you move it or before it arrives.
So, essential safety checks for any kind of species movement, planned or unplanned.
Absolutely essential, yes. You need that assessment to weigh the benefits against the very real risks.
Okay, so we've got prediction problems, P1, climate and human response complexities, P2. Now, priority 3 seems almost foundational, resolving the taxonomic impediment. Why is simply not being able to reliably name things such a crisis?
Because everything else depends on it. Accurate identification is the bedrock. If you can't reliably tell species A from species B, how can you possibly assess its risk? How can you track its spread? How can border control stop the right things?
And they argued this expertise, taxonomy, is actually eroding globally.
It is. There's less funding, less training, fewer experts in systematics. It's a slow-motion crisis that's undermining our ability to manage invasions effectively.
But wait, what about all the molecular tools? DNA barcoding and sequencing, wasn't that supposed to solve the identification problem?
It helps enormously, but the authors make a crucial point. It's not a silver bullet on its own. The problem is the reference libraries these DNA tools rely on.
They're incomplete or inaccurate.
Both. Often incomplete, especially for less studied groups like insects or fungi. But worse, they can be inaccurate. Sometimes sequences get uploaded and linked to the wrong species name because the original identification, done perhaps by a non-expert, was flawed.
Oh, wow. So the DNA could match, but it matches to the wrong identity in the database. Garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly. So you get a false sense of certainty. The molecular tools are powerful, but they're only as good as the underlying taxonomic knowledge that built the library.
And the scale of what we don't know is staggering. They throw out a number like potentially 1 trillion microbial species on Earth.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling. Yeah. If we're struggling to ID even relatively large, visible invaders, imagine the microscopic world, bacteria, fungi, protists, tiny invertebrates. We're likely missing the vast majority of invasions happening at that level.
Which means we're grossly underestimating the total number and probably the total impact of non-native species.
Almost certainly. And this isn't just theoretical. It has real-world consequences. They cite the example in South Africa with invasive cacti.
Right, what happened there?
Misidentification of either the cactus or the insect meant they introduced the wrong biological control agent or delayed introducing the right one. Years were wasted and the invasion got worse, all because of a failure in basic identification.
And it affects trade, too, like telling apart similar-looking fish.
Yes, the African catfish example. One species might be fine for aquaculture, but a very similar-looking relative, like the invasive walking catfish, is prohibited. If inspectors at the border or fish markets can't reliably tell them apart, the prohibited invasive species can slip through, threatening native ecosystems and potentially food security.
So the solution isn't just more DNA sequencing.
No, it's what they call integrative taxonomy. We need renewed investment in training experts who have both the classic morphological skills looking closely at the organisms themselves and the modern molecular skills. And we need to break down this weird disciplinary silo where you're either a taxonomist or an ecologist. You need to be both.
Okay, a major call for reinforcing the foundations of biology itself. That brings us to the fourth priority, enhancing international biosecurity strategies. The problem here is countries acting alone.
Pretty much. National biosecurity programs tend to focus inward what's coming across my border. They often neglect the fact that species move globally through complex networks. It's not always a direct flight from native range to new range.
And this is where they introduce that really fascinating concept, the bridgehead effect. What exactly is that?
It's a crucial insight. The bridgehead effect describes the phenomenon where a species invades a new region, not directly from its original native home, but from another region where it's already invaded and established.
So an invaded region becomes a launching pad for further invasions, like a hub.
Exactly, a hub-and-spoke model. That intermediate invaded region acts as a bridgehead, a source population for invading lots of other places.
They use the harlequin ladybird beetle as the prime example, right? Harmonia axiaris.
Perfect example, native to East Asia. But its massive global spread into Europe, Africa, South America didn't mostly come directly from Asia. It came from the large established populations in eastern North America.
So North America unintentionally became the global distribution center for this invasive beetle.
That's right, and the strategic implication is huge. Meaning that if you could coordinate efforts to control or eradicate that beetle in the bridgehead region, in this case, eastern North America, you'd get way more bang for your buck globally than if every single country independently tried to stop beetles arriving from North America at their own border.
Target the source hub. That makes logical sense. But politically, getting countries to cooperate on controlling a pest within another country's borders seems, well, really difficult.
Oh, absolutely. That's where you hit the wicked problems, as the paper calls them. You have stakeholders with completely opposing interests.
Like the nursery industry selling popular non-native plants versus ranchers whose grazing lands get invaded by those same plants.
Exactly. Or aquaculture wanting a certain fish versus conservationists trying to protect native fish from it. Managing these conflicts requires more than just science. It requires negotiation, policy, maybe economic incentives. It gets very messy.
And there's a data problem here too, isn't there, related to tracking these pathways?
Yes. The data from border inspections, what species are being intercepted, where they're coming from, that's gold dust for identifying these bridgehead regions and invasion pathways.
But it's often kept confidential.
Right. Because it can be sensitive trade information. Revealing what pests are coming from country X could spark a trade dispute. So the very data needed to implement this strategic bridgehead approach often isn't shared internationally.
A classic case of short-term economic or political concerns hindering long-term global biosecurity.
Precisely. It starves the scientists and policymakers of the information they need.
Okay, so what does this all mean? We've covered the 4 priorities: better impact prediction, tackling climate synergies, fixing the taxonomy gap, and fostering global cooperation, especially around bridgeheads. It feels like a call for a major overhaul.
It really is. Ricciardi and his colleagues are arguing for a fundamental shift, moving away from just reacting to invasions after they happen towards a more predictive, integrated, and internationally cooperative approach.
And not just within ecology, right? They stress linking up with other fields.
Definitely. Disease biology, because the principles of spread are similar. International trade economics, to understand the pathways and drivers. Social sciences, to figure out how to communicate risk effectively and manage those wicked stakeholder conflicts.
And they end with that powerful analogy tying back to the invasion debt concept.
Yeah, the idea that many future impacts are already locked in because of species already introduced or pathways already established. It's like a debt that's inevitably coming due.
And they compare this debt to disease symptoms appearing long after exposure because hygiene measures failed. It makes you think.
Well, it leads to their final provocative point. Think about how the world responded to track the spread of SARS-CoV-2. Remember how quickly data was shared globally, mapping the spread almost in real time?
Yeah, unprecedented cooperation driven by urgency.
Exactly. So the question they leave us, and you, the listener, with, is What if we applied that same level of urgency and data sharing cooperation to tracking other potentially harmful invasive organisms?
If border inspection data was shared instantly, if nations collaborated to manage bridgehead populations.
What could global biosecurity actually achieve? It suggests the capability is potentially there technologically. It's the political will, the cooperative framework
Right.
that's lagging behind the threat.
That's a powerful thought to end on. It really reframes the challenge. Understanding these four priorities feels essential for anyone grappling with global change today. If we don't address these gaps, that invasion debt just keeps growing.